Welcome to Analyze and Educate, your probably number 7 source for UFL content. I wouldn't say number 1 because that's a very high expectation. But we just got done with our week 3 slate of games. It's the haves and the have-nots. And just like the market this week, it's been extremely volatile with our quarterback play. We saw some guys kind of take steps back. We saw some guys kind of take steps forward. We see some continuity, possibly some injuries on the horizon. We're seeing right now our quarterbacks getting exposed. So they go into with more game tape, different teams, kind of the matchups and everything like that. We're seeing a lot of different play going on right now. And that is no more evident than what we just saw in the DC Defenders and Battlehawks games. But overall this week, we had 12 quarterbacks take snaps, 11 of them throw passes. Pretty standard, occasionally we'll get up to that 14 number, but we've added some quarterbacks into the mix. Trey Self signing with the Battlehawks, Andrew Peasley joining a team as well. So there's a lot of guys kind of getting into this cycle right now, and it should be a pretty exciting week. But without further ado, guys, if you're new here, please drop a like, comment, subscribe. I think I'm going to kind of, be a little edgy with some of this today. I think some people are going to be a little disappointed, not agree with where I'm going with some of these numbers, but in the end, I'd love to hear your feedback on it. And going back to our last week's video, I think, a lot of good feedback, whether it be on the Twitter or YouTube. So appreciate you guys always following along. Really makes this fun, really makes it worthwhile. So thank you guys for that. Only one honorable mention this week. It's Holton Ahlers came in on their jumbo package. I really want to see them kind of utilize him a little bit more, the way they did with Lindsey Scott last year and how Derek King was used. Arlington only put up 9 points this game, all on field goals. So I think kind of switching it up, having a little bit more RPO action with Ahlers. He's a lot more mobile. Obviously, with this rule where your third quarterback's inactive in an emergency capacity, I don't know about the roster manipulation you can kind of do with that, but I'd love to see Lennon even out there as well, kind of giving an extra boost with everything to really steamroll this offense. They scored 33 points against the Brahmas week 1, and then they've kind of been very anemic the last couple games. So, they haven't went over 20. So we'll see what happens with that. But Ahlers gets the nod. He came in for a couple snaps just in their jumbo package and then kind of moved on. No pass attempts or no rushing attempts. And he hasn't had any this year. But keep grinding, keep getting in the game. Eventually something's going to break and they're going to have to use him a little bit more to switch things up with Perez. QB 11 this week, Anthony Brown, 8 of 15, 40 yards, no touchdowns, no picks, 3 carries for 21 yards. It's the same old story with Brown. He's kind of played his way out. That offensive line is terrible. Cam Carter was terrible. They pick up another receiving threat. I do think they got a good stable of receivers, but when you have no time in the pocket, does it matter at all? They've obviously made the switch to Henderson. There's just no real spark to what Brown brings at this time. And as we've talked about this year, and as we'll continue to talk about, you just got to wonder if it really killed his NFL chances of making a comeback, or at least like a guy like Greg Roman really likes him, wants him in the system, especially out in LA with the Chargers where Roman's at now. Now I make a little jib, jab, whatever you want to call it about this, but CJ Johnson coming out and saying that Henderson is QB1, talking about consistency and whatnot. You can't put those two words in the same sentence, consistency and CJ Johnson. That's not how this rolls. As soon as Henderson deviates off the plan and whatnot, has a bad series, he's going to itch and make an impulse decision because that's kind of what he's done over the last couple of years. Check back to that 2023 game where he threw, I believe it was Montel Cozart in for Kenji Bahar, and Cozart threw an interception in the red zone. They lost the game. Our number 10 quarterback this week, Danny Etling, got the start. Very surprised. I know a couple people are upset because he was listed as QB2, and for betting purposes, I do agree with that. That is a little bit less than tasteful, but Etling was getting beat up most of the time back there. Started getting it together, pushing the ball downfield a little bit on his second or third series, I believe, and then gets knocked out. I believe that was Corey Mayfield who knocked him out. That was a vicious hit. He threw a really nice ball on the sideline to Cole Hicatini. was able to move the chains, and then the Bryce Perkins show began once again. We'll talk about Bryce in a little bit, but you got to wonder, Etling, another injury, hurt himself last year, took a pretty nasty hit. Wasn't really like shown on the sideline or anything like that. I know he was in the locker room, so you really got to wonder with him, age 30 quarterback, didn't get any looks last year. Is this kind of it for him? And is Michigan going to have to, one, bring another guy in, maybe a Brian Lewerke, and then we'll see maybe a Rocky Lombardi going up to QB2, and you kind of wonder, do they continue to do a 2 QB system with Perkins and Lombardi? I personally wouldn't, but we'll see what happens. Michigan drops a tough one. Michigan sneaks by their teeth on this one, 26-23, improving the 2-1. They'll be riding with Perkins next week, most likely. Who wants to talk about Manny Ball? Manny Ball. Not the best output today. Jacob Saylor's your number one receiving option. He had 91 on the day. You have really, really, really scary stuff going on. That 3 interceptions, the 1 touchdown, that was a prayer ball, 143 passing yards, inconsistent 16 of 29, 4 carries for 39, almost squeak one out for a touchdown, give him like 88 yards around that. But a lot of ill-advised throws, a lot of just kind of backyard football type stuff, throwing across his body when you're in field goal range, especially with Blankenship having a great season so far, was not the best output from Manny. Now, I'm not going to be one of these guys who's going to overreact or anything like that. With Manny, this is what happens. If you look at his DC game, I think when they won his first start last year, very efficient stat line. Then they go play at Arlington. He put up a similar stat line, 150, 180 yards, 1 touchdown, three picks. This is what's going to happen with Manny Wilkins, and you need to be on the train for it if you're a Battlehawks fan. It's really unfortunate. He was number 2, but they couldn't get a ground game going. Jacob Saylor's had like 7 carries for 1 yard. Javion Howard really had an issue going. They ran a lot of orbit, double reverses and whatnot. You wonder how much they miss Hakeem Butler. Their offensive line, those tackles are not getting it done, man. They are having a lot of issues on the outside. You're going to get a lot of exotic blitzes from a Williams-led defense. I know Blake Williams is in charge now, but his father's Greg Williams. So you're going to get a lot of that. And it didn't really seem like the issues were there in the interior. Obviously, when you look back on it on tape, it probably looks way worse than it is in live time. But Donovan West, to me, did all right. Panasuk did pretty good. Gonzalez looked like he was a little bit hurt. He did pretty well. All things considered, I do think their defense played pretty well as well. So, but you can't have 4 turnovers, 3 interceptions, especially in key spots, and expect to win a football game. It's really hard to. My QB8 this week is Troy Williams. Last week he didn't play. Limited sample size, 4 of 8, 63 yards, 4 carries, 35 yards, and a touchdown. When you see him mobile, moving around, you usually have pretty decent results. Obviously, they couldn't go over the hump. I accredit that to 2 EJ Perry interceptions. But Williams did his best to kind of relieve Perry when Perry gets knocked out. And, you want to see him kind of be a little bit more efficient with the football. I mean, 50%. 68, you're looking at about 8 yards per attempt, 15 yards per completion. But really want to see a little bit more out of their tight ends and whatnot. Just kind of didn't really seem like they had too much help on the ground. Really was the Perry. It was kind of like Perry moving around back there and Williams moving around back there trying to find some open receivers. When you got Jonathan Adams, they got Kyle Oxley a little bit more involved. I could see a little bit more of a boom on the offensive output, but I don't know. Maybe this Marcus Sims trade just benefited the culture of the Houston Roughnecks so much. But, I'm a little bit more down on the Showboats right now. Personally, I'd like to see just a little bit more. Obviously, you want to beat the Roughnecks, but I mean, they're still going to be a competitive, hard-fought team. And if they're keeping the games tight, having a good, having some of these playmakers on the outside doing what they do best, like Jonathan Adams, it's going to be an entertaining football game for sure. As I was writing this yesterday, so what I do is to keep my thoughts fresh, I start doing my evaluations during the games they're playing. Just notes, type it on my computer, nothing too crazy, right? As I'm doing this, I'm like looking, like EJ Perry's looking like the top QB this week. Just moving around in the pocket, making some big throws, throws a touchdown, and then he throws 2 picks, man. And it just was like, and then gets hurt, and you're just kind of like, what are we doing, man? What are we doing? That's going to be the story of the week for Perry and many of these QBs. Too many turnovers, trying to play hero ball a little bit. I know they do weekly Zooms with Jordan Palmer, and I don't know if Palmer told these guys to be a little bit more aggressive. But regardless, I do think Perry did a lot of good stuff this week. You just got to clean it up. Obviously, he got knocked out of the game. You don't know if he was ready to go back in or they were just like, oh, let Troy finish it out. I'm not sure. Not in that huddle. But regardless, still pretty high on Perry. I give it one more week. Let him get 4 quarters of play. And then if he kind of throws a dud out there like this, let's talk about moving on. But a lot to like with Perry, just as there is with Williams. You have Ken Wizen head coach team. You're going to feel like you're in a pretty decent spot. Don't let the stat line fool you. This was an ugly game. And if you just peel back on the stat line a little bit, you'll know this is an ugly game. Jordan Teamu, again, struggling to get over 50% of his passes, 243 yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 1 carry for -3 yards. No Mike DeLeo this week. You really need to find your De'Ara King. You need to get some more read option stuff. Kudos to Abram Smith and Deion Jackson for just putting this team on the back. Abram Smith, I think, had 22 carries for almost 50-something yards, over 50 yards, and just grinded and beat that St. Louis defense up. Both defenses, I think, played very well. Despite what the score will tell you and whatnot, I think the DC score is a little bit inflated because of the Manny Wilkins turnovers. But this was not an easy game for Tehamu. And there's a very, very risk it for the biscuit mentality here. Pushing the ball downfield a lot. He missed Chris Rowland a couple times, but in the end, sometimes it's better to be lucky than good, as you saw in that touchdown pass to Cornell Powell, which was actually supposed to be Mason Fairchild. But at the end of the day, a win's a win. They're 3-0. They're calling the shots at the XFL conference, and I mean, shout out to Blake Williams, shout out to Shannon Harris, that coaching staff, man, working their tails off because Teamu is not the guy that he was last year, and he's trending pretty similar to his 2023 status, which they went 9-1 and went to the championship game. So we'll see if they can ride that horse for a minute. But yeah, 2 bad interceptions and almost a third. My number 5 quarterback this week, I'm curious to see what happens because this was another ugly performance. 19 of 41, 255, 1 touchdown, 1 pick, 4 carries for 24 yards. They had a pretty good opening series until a Jay Sternberger fumble kind of killed that drive for them. And then it was pretty anemic for Corral until the end of the game. They could not get a rushing attack going. Corral ended up leading the team in rushing with 24 yards. But a false start penalty, which, guys, it is a dead ball foul, and you showed your hand by not knowing what that meant. A lot of people were very confused on why couldn't Bob Stoops decline it. You can't. The play's dead. It sucks. It really does suck. But it's the reality. Now, I do think there's a controversy in the fact that they reviewed it to make sure they got it right, X, Y, and Z. That I can understand. But a lot of people said, why don't they decline it? To me, that's just, it doesn't make sense to me. And showing your hand on that. People are calling for Case Cookus on the Twitter. Do I think we're at that point? I don't know. Give me till halftime next week. I think Birmingham is starting to figure it out a little bit. Their defense continues to look good. Anytime you stifle an Arlington Renegades team, especially last year, to only 9 points, I feel like you're in a pretty good spot. But Corral is looking rough, man. I think he's pressing too much. I think he's trying to do too many things and whatnot. And we'll see what happens. They take on Houston next week. You kind of wonder if it's a Houston Roughnecks team that's on the up and up. Birmingham has a great defensive front. You like where you're at with guys like Ronnie Perkins up front, and and Carlos Davis and DeMarcus Gates, Tate Crowder. You like those guys up front, the front seven, to give you a chance on the back end. You just got to make sure you contain Nolan Henderson. Hopefully that defense, when I say that defense, I mean Houston's cools down a little bit off their high. Corral can kind of really center it in. If not, I'd probably put Cookus in if you're at like 6 points at the half on 2 field goals. You're looking anemic. You look at a 9 for 18, 9 for 20 stat line from Corral. You probably want to give Cookus a go at it, which would be a little bit different to see, but we'll find out next week. I give Perez the nod at 4 because of the sample size and what he's done. I think their problem was they couldn't get Balaj explosive the way that they normally can. I mean, 26 of 38 for 204. I know, really to me, I wanted to see a little bit more out of Canella down the field like they've done. I'd rather sometimes have a 2 for 50 from Canella than like a 4 for 38 or whatever. But, 26 of 38 for 204, no touchdowns, no picks. It just seemed like a little bit of a game managing situation. And this is why, I bang the table to have a guy like Holton Ahlers out there or Luke Lennon so they can run some RPO. And Arlington did a good job doing that with Kelly Bryant 2 years ago and De'Ara King last year. And it really just kind of made life a little bit difficult for a lot of these guys. So we'll see what happens. Perez, I mean, I'd stay pretty calm. They play the Battlehawks next week. Both teams are 2-1. St. Louis got a tough defense. I think they take care of business, but we'll see, man. We'll really see. A little bit disappointing. You throw for over 200 yards as Perez. You like to punch it in the end zone once or twice, but got to be able to finish, man. Got to be able to finish. Who would have thought that Kellen Mond played one of the better games of UFL football after the first 2 weeks? Is it perfect? No. Does he benefit from a lot of anemic play? Yeah. But 19 of 31, 152 yards, 1 touchdown, no picks, no turnovers, 6 carries for 39 yards. He's been our number 7 quarterback the last 3 weeks. What I really liked about Mond is even on his incompletions against the Michigan front 7, and guys, I do think these front 7s for at least 5 of these teams, very high caliber football players. I mean, Garrett Marino, Kenny Willikins, Breland Speaks, Rondell Carter, Frank Ginda. These are some dudes, man. These are fringe dudes on the NFL signing cycle. And I think they're only going to get better as the season goes on. Really like what Michigan's doing. Mond had some tough runs, put his shoulder down, gets him in a position to kick a field goal. I mean, you can debate the destroying thing. He's looked a little bit better. I'm not convinced. I mean, you have a guy like Matt Amendola in there, maybe you have a better chance. I know Matt Amendola is doing bodybuilding. There's a lot of other kickers on the street right now that have actually been in that situation. But regardless, Mond can't kick the football. Brought him back. They benefited from an interception return for a touchdown. In the end, between A.J. Smith leaving, Wade Phillips not being on the sidelines, a lot of extra pressure on Peyton Party. You got to like what you see out of San Antonio, despite them being 0-3, and they're going to be competitive, and they put up a good fight against what's probably looking like a playoff team on the USFL side, the Michigan Panthers. My number 2 QB this week, 17 of 23, 193, no touchdowns, 1 pick, 10 carries for 30 yards, and 2 rushing touchdowns. That pick killed me, man. Bryce Perkins was going to be my number 1 if it wasn't for that pick, especially if they were able to score through the air on his legs. I mean, you can't. It was probably the best quarterback play this week outside of that interception. Probably should have made the tackle. He didn't. But they're able to escape through on it. Real lot of kudos for Michigan right here, man. Once again, talked about sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. Michigan's defense stepped up, was able to pretty much stifle Mond towards the end of the game, especially. They adjusted. Perkins did a really good job using his legs, as he always does. Once Etling gets out, it's his game to control, especially because Lombardi, as the QB3, even though Etling's out, can't be utilized unless Perkins gets hurt. You saw Perkins take some beatings, man, and he was able to keep coming at it. I think he drew like 2 penalties himself as well. You like where you're at if you're Michigan. You want to keep rolling with it, and you want to keep, letting Perkins do what's best. Give him a whole game. Really start utilizing these other receivers. I mean, CLC Mariners, dude, man. Devin Ross, big shout out to him stepping up, helping out in the return game. It just seemed like every time Devin Ross had the football in his hand, good things happened. I think he had 3 first downs on all 3 of his receptions. And then I think he added another 200 yards plus returning. So you really like the weapons they have. Toa Tua doing a really good job kind of, spelling and helping out Nate McCreary. And then Jaden Sheridan, man, dude, that guy is Darnell Jefferson. And that's a program reference if you don't get it. But yeah, that guy's a dude, man. And utilizing him, getting the ball in his hands in space, I think Perkins found himself another toy, man, and that's going to just make their life so much easier. I wonder if I get heat for this, but to come into the game cold, down, go 10 of 11 for 80 yards, 1 touchdown, no picks, 3 carries for 15 yards. I mean, who else could you really argue that it would be the number 1 pick for our quarterback rankings this week? I've been very vocal. I've said that Nolan Henderson is a lot better than people give him credit for. I think it's kind of sad he's kind of meandered through this whole process and not really given any confidence. And I would argue that that's been a very big situation for Houston in general. But I do like the fact that CJ did come out, because now it kind of puts pressure to keep him there. I mean, for all 5,000 fans that go to these Roughneck games or whatever, 8,000, I don't know. But you're going to hopefully see a full game of Nolan Henderson against a Birmingham Stallions team that has an electric front seven. Let this dude play. Let this dude run around and try to make plays, because that offensive line is not good enough to give someone 3-4 seconds. So you do need someone back there who's a lot more mobile. Regardless, Nolan Henderson, if you're watching this, you get to be the best quarterback of the UFL this week going into week 4. Congratulations for that. So those are our week 3 going into week 4 quarterback rankings. I think there's a little bit of there's going to be a little bit of, controversy, confrontation on it. But if there is, leave a comment. Let me know. Let me know how right I was. Let me know how wrong I was. Either way, I continue to do these. I love doing them. I love the feedback you guys give me. It kind of motivates me to keep doing it. I do think this week was the best week of football. However, as you can tell by our rankings, it might not have been the best week of quarterback play. So, guys, if you're new here, drop a like, subscribe, comment, and I'll see you next week, guys. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to do these for you.